of Pensacola, and the winds thankfully are down, John, 135 miles per hour.
They are 135 miles an hour, and that's down quite a bit from 150. So, but we don't want to have folks believe that that is not still a very powerful hurricane. It is still a Category 4 hurricane, 135 miles an hour, about like Hugo was when it made landfall back in 1989, I believe it was.
And we know the damage that did. Let's go ahead and show the Doppler radar here, and you can see the heavier rain bands. As a matter of fact, take this full, and I'll give you a quick glance. We can circle this a little for you. First batch of rain came in. There may actually be a bit of a lull now near the coastline, and so don't get surprised if you see it quiet down just a little bit. Here comes the next batch of rain, and this one not only will be heavy, but of course is also going to have those hurricane force winds, which should be coming ashore any time. There's the center of the hurricane, and at this spot right about there, we've already had reports of sustained hurricane force winds, and so the heavy rain is one thing, but it's the winds picking up that's going to be a real concern in the next few hours. Going a little bit closer, you can see the eye. And John, now a report that we had in the last hour was that the eye wall is now just 5 miles wide. What's the significance of
That is a very, very small eye. Generally speaking, some of the more powerful hurricanes that we've seen in the past had very small eyes. I'll have to say that I have never seen one, I don't think, in the Atlantic quite as small as that. Nor have I ever seen one strengthen as rapidly as it did last night. The pressure dropped that much. Nor have I ever seen an October hurricane in the Gulf of Mexico anywhere near this strong.
Have you ever seen a hurricane hit the same spot twice in 1 year?
Well, that has happened before. Miami, Florida, for example, has had more than one hit in 1 year. So that does happen sometimes.
Here's a visible satellite picture, and one thing that is real obvious, of course, right from the start is we can't see the eye on this.
Well, that eye, Jill, is so tiny, and the thunderstorms around the heavy rain, thunderstorms around the eye itself are sort of overshooting a little bit, and you can't see down to and see the eye. The eye is very, very tiny.
Okay, so in the next few hours, winds will be picking up. We're going to continue to update this map, but it shows insignificant winds really at this point. It'll be a quick change in the next few hours.
I see some up there now to 36 miles an hour. That's around Mobile, I guess. That's the strongest ones we've seen. But you're right, they will be picking up, and they'll be picking up rather quickly.
Okay, let's go back to the categories on the Saffir-Simpson scale. Aaron, that came in beginning of August, was a Category 1. This is a Category 4, and the difference is really pretty incredible.
Well, it is, Jill, because the damage is really the force on houses and so on. It kind of varies as a square of the wind, not the wind itself. In other words, if you double the wind, you increase the force by 4 times. If you triple it, you increase it by 9 times. So the excuse me, the upshot of all this is that we could expect more than 100 times the damage with a Category 4 hurricane as we would with a Category 1.
And really, that Category 1, Aaron, did a lot of damage.
I know
in Pensacola.
it did. It blew, as you pointed out, it blew down a lot of trees, and I'll tell you, a lot more trees will blow down this time. And this is a big hazard for houses because a lot of trees do fall on houses.
Of course, with this type hurricane and this type place, storm surge is going to be one of the big concerns.
And that's on the beach itself, and we expect an enormous storm surge actually with this hurricane, and it'll be right where the eye comes ashore, and to the east of that for some 30 or 40 miles will be the highest storm surge.
Okay, let's quickly hit on what we can expect once the hurricane comes ashore in the next 24, 48 hours.
Well, unfortunately, Jill, this hurricane is going to move pretty rapidly. That might be a good thing for some folks. It won't rain as long. But as a hurricane moves inland, if it's a powerful hurricane when it comes in, and if it's moving rapidly, it has hurricane force winds much farther inland. In Hugo, we saw hurricane force winds all the way from Charleston to Charlotte, North Carolina. And we'll see hurricane force winds here well up into Alabama and Georgia.
So folks as far north as Birmingham and Atlanta can at least expect high winds late tonight, early tomorrow morning.
Yes, indeed, they will. And lots of rain, too, Jill.
We've had a lot of people calling in concerned about that. We'll keep you up to date, of course, on Hurricane Opal. Stay tuned. We'll be back shortly.
Right around the time it's coming in Pensacola, around 6 o'clock Central Time. The high would be 9:21 a.m. Thursday. And the low tide now 9:16 p.m. at Apalachicola local time. And that's going to be pretty close to the time when the water is going to be getting the highest. And ditto that for Mobile Bay, or Mobile, Alabama itself on the bay, about 7 o'clock Central Time. But don't let your guard down. The water is going to be high anyway. Just thankfully your tide is going to be a little bit lower. You don't have of the Mississippi River all the way around the bend to Anclote Key, and the continental shelf is such in some of these areas that the propensity for very high water is there. So especially on the east side of that eye, you're going to have coastal flooding. Strike probability has been narrowed down from Mobile Bay to around Panama City, Florida, somewhere in there, and most likely the middle of this red area would be the most likely place for landfall, pretty close to Pensacola, Florida, and that within the next, we'll figure it out, 135 Irving platforms, and the 115 plus is pretty close to the center, but a large weather system that is going to bring the storm surge up to 12 to 20 feet anywhere east of Mobile Bay and possibly on down close to the Tampa Bay area. So this is one of our major threats. Coastal flood warnings are already from Port O'Connor to Brownsville, and east of this our flooding advisories are covered by those storm surge advisories and the hurricane warnings that we now have in effect. This goes back a few hours showing you the enhanced area on infrared, the dark reds meaning very cold and high cloud tops, and it's tacking a pretty steady course right toward the Alabama and Florida state line. Now again, anywhere east of there, the water is going to be much, much higher than just to the west, but the winds will easily be hurricane force either side of that storm center. One other vantage point we have shows a little bit of dry air beginning to get entrained in, and this could be one of the reasons why it has lost just a little bit of strength, but the upper level trough that's associated with it now is going to sling it northward even more rapidly, if anything, over the Appalachians tomorrow, and then maybe crossing the Appalachians in the next couple of days. Torrential rains and even some gusty winds a couple of 100 miles away from the coastline.
Know what frustrates me? People
6 inches already in Atlanta since last night, in Birmingham 6 inches since sometime yesterday, all the way into the Appalachians, and as you get into mountainous terrain, the threat of flash flooding and poor drainage increases. Parts of northern Florida and the flash flood advisory too. Let's take a look at the latest radar superimposed on satellite, and we can see the large ball of white, and that is the cloudiness from Opal, and right near the middle an eye that's only about 5-6 miles in diameter, which is way down on the scale of what commonly happens. Very heavy rain approaching Mobile Bay to Panama City, and some very heavy rain approaching Atlanta and Montgomery, Alabama. The rainy travel nationwide centered on the east, but we also have some snow mixed in the Rockies and the threat of some even severe thunderstorms in Nebraska, as well as possible tornadoes in parts of the southeast. The windy travel coming in over 50 miles an hour west and Gulf.
Presenting the ultimate tire for your sport utility.
Thanks for joining us this afternoon. I'm Jill Brown here in the Weather Channel Forecast Center, joined by John Hope, our hurricane expert. And we have a bit of a surprise hurricane here. I think this one developed so quickly, John, that people may not be aware. We have a Category 4 hurricane headed for the Florida Gulf Coast. Really.
Well, we thought it would intensify yesterday, Jill, but we were pretty astonished to see how much it did intensify. It strengthened more rapidly almost than any other hurricane we've seen.
This, we can take a look at the satellite picture here now, and you can see how the clouds are already coming up along the coastline. We have seen some reports of hurricane force winds at this point already. Is that right, John?
Yes, we know at the mouth of the Mississippi there around Bootsville that they have winds now gusting to about 85 miles per hour. And that is west of the hurricane. These are north winds. And Jill, it's moving right in the direction of Pensacola fairly rapidly. We don't see much slowing down. So we think it's going to move right in there. And some heavy rain bands, you can see them on the satellite picture coming in there now. But the core of the hurricane still a ways offshore, but it won't be too long before it begins to get there.
All right, right now we can go to, sorry, we don't have Bill Keneally. I'm sorry, we do have a crew down there. They're trying to get in position to give us a live shot. They've been stuck in traffic this morning, and that's probably one of our big concerns at this point. And we've been hearing that roads are totally blocked.
People are advised, the state of Florida advises, that no one try to get out on the highway in that area now. It's just all gridlock there, and people need to be getting off the road, not on the road. It's too late to get on the road and try to go someplace. You can't go.
That's right. Our crew has experienced the exact same thing in Pensacola Beach this morning, trying to evacuate. They were now in a shelter, and we're hoping to have a live shot from them shortly. At this point, folks who cannot evacuate, what can they do, John?
Okay, they either must go to a shelter, or for the most part, most people should try to go to their own home, batten it down the best they can. The windows, of all possible, even at this late, those windows should be covered, not with tape, but they need to be boarded up. Because we have found the hard way sometimes that in a hurricane, when the windows blow out, then an awful lot of damage in the house will follow that. So we need to try to keep the windows intact. But we want to advise people, should they see their house beginning to fall apart or deteriorate, which it could do in this hurricane, then they need to get in an inner closet, a stairwell, away from windows, use mattresses and clothing to protect themselves from any flying debris.
Okay. At this point, we have a hurricane compared to Hugo and Andrew.
Well, compared to Hugo, right now the pressure's gone up a little bit. It's up in the 934, I think it was, and that's exactly the same as Hugo had. It's a little more greater pressure than Andrew had. So at this point, Andrew was a little stronger than this hurricane is as we speak.
Okay, let's go ahead and give you the latest specifics on Opal. Getting back to Opal here, the noon update, it was centered at 28.6 north, 87.9 west, or 135 miles south-southwest of Pensacola. Okay, that's an hour ago.
And so it's made another 25 miles, so it can just chop 25 miles off, and we're only talking about 105. But again, we want to remind people that the hurricane force winds extend out farther than that. They extend out about 145 miles from the center. So we believe that on the beaches, that hurricane force winds already beginning to impact the Alabama coast and the Florida Panhandle coast.
Okay, I think now we do have Bill Keneally and our crew, and we'll see if we can go to Bill. I can see him standing out there in the rain. Bill, what is the situation where you are at this point?
At the R.C. Lipscomb Elementary School, and again we're near US 29 and 10 Mile Road North. Already we have 450 people here. This is a Red Cross shelter, and once again, if they're expecting more, I think they'll get them. Last time out they had double this number for Hurricane Erin. They had nearly 900 people here, and once again they're still coming in. They're filing in rather quickly, and we want to emphasize that this shelter is still open, so anybody on the north side of Pensacola that needs to get out, please heed these warnings now.
Bill, have you found people that are on the roadways beginning to just park their cars and abandon them at this point?
No, Jill, actually things have gotten a lot better. Now I'm not sure how it is down around the bridge, down around the Pensacola Bay Bridge, where the traffic had been very bad about 11 or 11:30 local time. However, as we got north within about a half a mile of I-10, magically things cleared up, and now we're in good shape. We have our supplies. There are still some hotel rooms to be had, and hopefully everybody can get out that needs to get out very, very shortly.
All right, and again, they are advising people not to leave at this point. So where Bill is and our crew at the shelter is the place to be.
Yes, Bill, you know that, I guess, that the state of Florida is advising no one to try to get out on the highways.
Okay, John, I think that is probably a wise choice. However, I think what happened, the warnings came out last night around 10 o'clock local time here, and I'm not sure how many people heard them. I think everybody tried to make that mass exodus starting around dawn, and believe me, it's been gridlock ever since, but now things have finally improved north of I-10.
Well, the hurricane not that far away, Bill. We see some rain bands coming into the south coast of the Panhandle there that we think have hurricane force winds. So you can expect the winds to pick up pretty rapidly over the next few hours.
Well, John, we just had a gully washer come on by. I'd say some gusts as high as 35, but again, the winds have not been near as high inland as of yet. Back around the 10 o'clock hour Atlanta time, we actually had some winds better than 50 miles per hour down at the Pensacola Beach. And by the way, as the crow flies, we're about 12 miles north of the actual shorefront.
Okay, Bill, we'll be checking back with you again in about a half hour's time. And if we take a look at the latest radar, you can see about where Bill is, and you can see that rain coming in. Well, there's not going to be too many breaks in the rain at this point any longer, John.
No, it's going to be pretty steady rain. There will be very few breaks from now on.
And at this point, he was mentioning the traffic backed up. Fortunately, we're hearing some breaks now, but we were talking about Interstate 10 is just lined with pine trees on either side, and those go down quickly.
Well, as you saw in Erin, quite a few trees went down, and a lot more trees will go down this time, and that will, some of those trees will fall on the highway, I'm sure.
Yeah, that'll be a real problem. We can see the satellite picture here at this point, you can kind of pick out where the center is, but you still can't see an eye, a very small eye.
You can't see the eye, Jill, because it's so small and it's covered with these big thunderstorm clouds, and that's why you can't actually see the eye. The eye is still a very, very tiny eye, but it's there.
It's there, and they're gonna be feeling it very shortly.
They are,
As a matter
yes.
of fact, here are the wind gusts, and we've been updating this one. Now it looks like around Mobile, gust to 32. I think last hour was 36. Obviously, it's going to fluctuate.
And you notice way over there to Sarasota, gusting to 40 miles per hour.
So there's going to be a wide expanse area that's affected by this, but the worst of it will be right around the eye.
Right around the eye, and that's where the high storm surge is going to be. We're expecting a massive storm surge up as much as 20 feet near where the eye crosses the coast and about 30 or 40 miles to the east of there. And then, Jill, the forward speed of movement, moving over 20 miles an hour, that's going to allow hurricane force winds to go inland a good distance. For example, we remember in Hugo, we had hurricane force winds all the way from Charleston, South Carolina to Charlotte, North Carolina.
And folks inland are understandably a little nervous about this.
And they
Late tonight and tomorrow morning, wind gusts, what, 50 or 60
It'll
miles
be a
per
new
hour?
experience for some as far inland as that, but on up to Alabama and into the western part of Georgia, we're going to see some strong winds.
And we didn't have that with Aaron, but it was a much weaker hurricane. Let's take a look at the Saffir-Simpson scale and give folks an idea of the difference between Aaron, that came in almost the exact same spot as Opal is forecast to do. It was a Category 1, now we're talking about a Category 4.
And we're talking about a tremendous difference, and we're talking about the force of a Category 4 hurricane. That will do extreme damage where a number 1, Category 1 would be minimal, because the force of the wind verifies as it varies as the square of the wind. In other words, if you double it, you increase the force 4 times, triple it 9 times, and so on.
So we're talking about Aaron compared to Opal, maybe 100 to 120 times more damage.
That's very possible, very possible.
Okay, let's get a quick look at the storm surge areas. As you mentioned earlier, this could be a real problem. Hopefully everyone's already evacuated from the beaches, and that's where obviously the storm surge will be.
Well, on our graphic there, you see the red showing where it will be 12 to 20 feet, but we would emphasize that the 20 feet will be fairly close, we think, within 30 or 40 miles to the east of where the eye crosses the coast.
Okay, and then once it goes ashore, let's kind of get into the future a little bit here. And we think that at this point we could see a hurricane kind of coming inland, and perhaps how long do you think, John, it could stay a hurricane?
Well, it could stay a hurricane well up into the northern part of Alabama, I think, and the northwestern part of Georgia. Not 130 miles an hour, but certainly gusts to hurricane force.
As faster it moves, the longer it'll stay a hurricane.
Exactly. The farther inland it will stay a hurricane. Right.
Alrighty. Well, we'll continue to give you updates on Opal. Please stay with us here at the Weather Channel. We'll also have your local forecasts coming up.
Every morning.
Chattanooga over to Birmingham and Anniston, of course Montgomery, we will see the rain funnel right up through the Appalachians, so we could be looking at rainfall tallies easily in that 5 to 10 inch range as we see what is left over of Opal, a tropical low, make its way up through the Appalachians. Farther to the west, we also have another low pressure center, and essentially all of this energy and atmosphere, a hurricane plus this cold front, also a powerful front, going to merge, bringing lots of rain to portions of the north. We even find some snow across portions of the Rockies. It's snowing today in the Rockies once again. Highs for your Thursday, some 90s and 80s right up through the Mississippi Valley. For Friday, a little bit cooler. Some of the cool air coming in behind the front. We'll see 70s from Jackson all the way up towards Cincinnati, and then even a little bit more of a cool down as the cold front makes its presence known. 50s around Chicago and over toward Detroit. That's Saturday into Sunday. Not much of a change. If anything, a slow moderating trend. In other words, it's going to get a little bit milder. See some of those 60s around Detroit by Monday. Here's our Friday forecast. Heavy rain, windy conditions. That is what is left over with all that energy from the hurricane, probably making landfall in extreme northwestern areas of Florida near Pensacola, but by Friday should be making its way right up the spine of the Appalachians and somewhere over toward Pennsylvania and New York State. Saturday's forecast, a gradual drying trend, still some showery conditions possible from New York and Philly over to Erie, but we think certainly by the time Sunday, Monday roll around, we do see the hurricane probably making landfall again late this afternoon, early this evening, somewhere in the vicinity of the Pensacola. That's where we're looking presently. Lots of heavy rain out ahead of the hurricane. By the time Thursday rolls around, the hurricane should strengthen or weaken into a tropical storm, probably somewhere between Atlanta and Birmingham, so there's going to be still quite a bit of wind and also lots of rain, an additional 5 to 10 inches of rain, certainly a possibility in the path somewhere in the vicinity of the hurricane tropical storm, then eventually low pressure area, locally 8 inches or more. Temperatures for your Wednesday, 70s from Cincinnati down the Gulf Coast, but much cooler in the Rockies, certainly cooler.
Glenn is with the Escambia County Emergency Management. Mr. Thielen, what can you tell us?
Well, we're waiting for the storm to hit. We can't believe it that twice in a couple of months here we appear to be the target, but this time for, I think Mr. Hope will agree, a hurricane that is way beyond what we saw with Hurricane Aaron.
It is indeed, John. There's a tremendous difference between a Category 1 to Category 4, so I'm afraid that the damage and so on is going to be much more extensive. Are you satisfied that you've got as many people in shelters as need to be, and what about the road situation? Are they getting off the road a little bit now?
2 hours ago, we asked them to give up what was proving to be a futile attempt to evacuate. Hurricane Opal was moving 5 times as fast as the traffic was. So we asked them to get off and get into our shelters and our refuges for last resort, and we're pretty happy with the way the roads are clearing out now.
And the beaches are pretty well evacuated, you think?
We're very happy with that, and that was one asset, an inheritance, I guess, from Hurricane Aaron. People saw what a Category 1 could do. The people who stayed behind on the beaches said never again, and we were very happy with the response to our evacuation order.
We are very concerned about that storm surge there, John. You know better than I do, I think, what a 20-foot storm surge would do in the Pensacola area.
Well, I think we remember Camille down here back in 1969, and we know what a 20-foot or so storm surge would do. So, and we know that Aaron was not very typical in that regard, that we had practically zero storm surge there. So we're very mindful of that, and that's why we're very happy that we've got people off our barrier islands.
Okay, thank you. John Thielen with Escambia Emergency Management. And John, at this point, they're telling people don't evacuate, don't go to shelters. What can they do if they're at home?
Well, if they're at home, they want to be sure that they have the house battened down the very best they can do it. There's certainly need to have the windows covered if that's at all possible. It's getting a little late to do that, I'm sure, if you haven't already done it. And sometimes people rely on taping the window, but in a Category 4 hurricane, that's not going to be enough. There's a lot of debris flying around, and that will break the windows out. But what we need to tell people to do, in case they are aware during the height of the hurricane that their house is sort of being damaged quite a bit, they need to make sure they get away from all the windows into an interior room, cover themselves up with mattresses or clothing, anything that they can get a hold of.
Okay, and that's probably, we're going to begin to see hurricane force winds soon, so we may be seeing.
Well, in gusts we're going to see them pretty soon, but the core of the hurricane, where the 130-mile-an-hour winds are, still a ways away. It'll be a few more hours before that part of the hurricane gets there.
Okay, let's take a look at the latest stats then. We haven't done that yet. This is the noon update from the Hurricane Center.